From Glory to Gut Punch, How Harley-Davidson Lost the American Dream. There was a time when Harley-Davidson wasn't just a motorcycle, it was a thunderous declaration of freedom, an anthem on wheels, chrome and steel stitched into the American soul. You didn't just ride a Harley, you lived it, you became it. From the dusty highways of the Midwest to the roaring coasts of California, Harley was the beating heart of rebellion. A badge of honor for outlaws, veterans, dreamers, and road warriors who believed in something raw, real, and unapologetically American. But that dream, it's crashing. Hard. In 2025, Harley-Davidson finds itself not at a crossroads, but on a cliff's edge, with its tires spinning and smoke rising. The company that once stood as a symbol of rugged patriotism is now being accused of turning its back on the very people who built it. And the fire starter behind this explosion? None other than Donald Trump.
Harley-Davidson is using that as an excuse, and I don't like that. I think the people that ride Harleys are not happy with Harley-Davidson, and I wouldn't be either.
When Trump unloaded on Harley, it wasn't some offhand political jab. It was a full-throttle attack. He accused them of selling out their American roots in favor of chasing global profits and softening their identity for foreign appeal. No sugarcoating, no backpedaling, just a brutal takedown of a brand he claimed had betrayed its own people. And here's the twist. Many Americans agreed. You see, Harley's downfall didn't begin with a single decision. It was a slow drift. A series of choices wrapped in corporate lingo like global expansion and cost efficiency. In 2018, they opened a manufacturing plant in Thailand, saying it was strategic, practical, necessary. But to Harley's loyal fans, it felt like betrayal. Because Harley wasn't just about the bike. It was about the story. It was about American steel, American jobs, American pride. It was about a factory worker in Milwaukee watching his craft rumble down Route 66. It was about the freedom to ride with no ceiling above you and no foreign label below your seat. And then came the Made in Thailand sticker. For many, that was the final insult. It wasn't just about outsourcing, it was about identity. A 100-year legacy gone global and lost in translation.
Well, tonight the president going even further, saying Harley-Davidson motorcycles should never be built in another country. And he's now threatening them with new taxes.
The Thailand turn. How Harley-Davidson rode straight into a brand crisis. You want to know where Harley-Davidson lost its soul? Not in some boardroom or budget spreadsheet, but in Thailand. That's where the legend began to rewind the clock. Donald Trump had just fired up his America First economic engine. Steel and aluminum tariffs, trade deals ripped up, a warpath against foreign outsourcing. The message to corporate America was crystal clear. Bring jobs home or face the heat. And then, Harley-Davidson did the unthinkable. While the rest of the country was bracing for a manufacturing comeback, Harley decided to do the exact opposite. In 2018, they cut the ribbon on a sparkling new production plant in Thailand. Not to serve a new Asian market, not to innovate some futuristic line of bikes. No, this was about dodging European retaliation from Trump's trade war. A chess move made to protect margins. They dressed it up as strategic, cost-efficient, and necessary in a global economy. But real Americans saw right through it. The translation? We're covering our profits, not our people. This wasn't just a logistical shift, it was a moral pivot. And the moment it happened, Harley didn't just move manufacturing offshore, they moved the heart of their brand with it. You'd think they'd do it quietly, maybe scale back. But Harley doubled down. First, they shut down their Kansas City plant, one of the last standing monuments to their American-made legacy. Hundreds of jobs gone, blue-collar workers left in the dust. Then, in a bizarre PR move, they beefed up production at their York, Pennsylvania facility, almost like they were saying, "See, we still care about the homeland." But behind the curtain, they were rapidly expanding operations in Brazil and India too, like throwing darts at a globe and hoping the dollars would stick. It was global ambition dressed as necessity. But to loyal riders, it looked like betrayal. Then came the backlash, and leading the charge, Trump himself. He didn't hold back. He slammed Harley publicly, warning them that if they shipped jobs overseas and then tried to sell back into the U.S., they'd get slammed with taxes like never before. "Leave America," he said, "and the aura will be gone." And honestly, he wasn't wrong. Because Harley isn't just some motor company. It's not a spreadsheet. It's a symbol of freedom, of rebellion, of American grit. And when that symbol gets stamped with "assembled in Thailand," it hits different. But here's where it really went off the rails. Those Thailand-built bikes, they weren't just for the Asian or European markets. Nope, they were quietly shipped back to American dealerships. The same ones where old-school riders stood with flags on their jackets and eagles on their tanks. Imagine spending decades building a legacy around American-made pride, and then selling your most loyal fans something built on another continent. All while revving up patriotic branding. That's not just ironic, it's insulting. And while Trump was out on stages saying, "Companies are coming home," Harley was busy boarding a one-way flight to Southeast Asia. It was a tone-deaf move in a red-hot political climate, and they didn't stop there. When Trump took aim at India's sky-high tariffs, over 100% on American bikes, Harley didn't push back. They didn't rally behind Made in America. Instead, they shrugged and said, "It's just math." But that's where they got it all wrong. Because Harley doesn't sell math, it sells mythology. It sells a feeling, a movement, a roar that says, "I was born free." And freedom can't be outsourced. It can't be reduced to margins. It can't be manufactured in factories oceans away from where your roots were planted. Harley-Davidson made a choice. They bet on numbers over narrative, efficiency over emotion, globalism over loyalty. And in doing so, they fractured the very foundation of their brand. Because culture isn't built on cost-cutting. It's built on trust. And once you lose that trust, no amount of strategy, spin, or expansion can buy it back. Not in Kansas City, not in York, not in Thailand, not anywhere. It started with a tweet, but what followed was a full-blown identity crisis. The moment Donald Trump blasted Harley-Davidson for moving jobs overseas, it wasn't just a headline. It was a gut punch to a brand that had built its reputation on being the last true symbol of American grit. And the fallout? Immediate and brutal. Harley's stock collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. Investors panicked, fans revolted. And suddenly this brand that once roared down highways like an American battle cry started sounding more like a corporate jingle from a Bangkok office tower. This wasn't a one-time stumble. It was the latest chapter in a long, slow drift away from everything Harley once stood for. Back in the 1980s, they were on the ropes too, facing a flood of cheaper, sleeker bikes from Japan. But back then, they had an ace up their sleeve: the American government. Washington stepped in with tariffs, and Harley responded with grit. They leaned into their roots, doubled down on craftsmanship, reinvented themselves as a symbol of American resilience. And it worked. The company clawed its way back, not just in sales, but in spirit. But this time, the rescue wasn't coming. There were no heroes on the horizon, no patriotic turnaround. Instead, Harley bet everything on globalization. They closed down plants in America, opened new ones in Thailand, and tried to sell it all as strategic restructuring. But what customers heard was something very different. "We're leaving. And worse, we're leaving you." For the millions who grew up worshiping Harley's rebellious spirit, this wasn't just a bad business decision. It was a betrayal. These weren't consumers. They were loyalists. They believed in the myth. They lived the lifestyle, and they didn't want bikes built in sanitized factories across the globe. They wanted that gritty, all-American machine, forged in the fires of Milwaukee with calloused hands and American steel. What they got instead were press releases about market flexibility and electric innovation, written in corporate jargon that felt colder than chrome on a January morning. Trump didn't create this outrage. He simply gave it a microphone. His words hit like a grenade. If Harley wanted to move abroad, they'd pay dearly to sell back into the U.S. market. That wasn't just economic rhetoric. It was a cultural declaration. And suddenly, Harley wasn't just a motorcycle company anymore. It became a symbol in the middle of America's identity war. It wasn't about imports or taxes. It was about pride, loyalty, authenticity. And to many, Harley had crossed a line you just don't come back from. Then came the killer word: woke. With a single phrase, Harley-Davidson got dragged into the cultural crossfire. What used to be your granddad's ride, the one he parked in the garage like a shrine, was now being mocked as another casualty of the so-called woke corporate agenda. Whether fair or not, perception is everything. And the perception was that Harley had gone soft, that the last rebel of the road had become just another brand, chasing trends and losing itself in the process. And now the damage isn't just on the factory floor or in the stock market. It's in the soul of the brand. The mystique is cracking. The roar is fading. And while Harley still sells bikes, it's struggling to sell what really mattered all along: the dream, the identity, the unshakable belief that riding a Harley meant something more than horsepower. It meant freedom. It meant rebellion. It meant America. But when that bike rolls off a foreign assembly line, packed with parts sourced globally and delivered with a marketing pitch instead of a purpose, what's left? What happens when the legend forgets why it became a legend in the first place? That's the question Harley-Davidson is facing now. And unless they find their way back to the soul, the story, the streets that made them, this brand might just ride itself into a future where no one's listening to the sound of its engine anymore. Because in the end, people didn't fall in love with Harley because it was convenient. They fell in love because it felt like America on two wheels. And once that feeling's gone, no factory, no matter where it's built, can bring it back. They weren't customers. They were brothers and sisters of the open road. They were men who bled red, white, and engine oil. Women who could rebuild a carburetor before most could parallel park. They were veterans, blue-collar warriors, steelworkers, and old-school rebels whose tattoos weren't trendy. They were testimony. Leather wasn't a costume. It was the second skin of a subculture, a declaration, a uniform. These people weren't interested in silence. They wanted thunder, not touchscreens, torque, not press releases, pulse. But then the machine changed. Harley-Davidson, the roaring ghost of American rebellion, the symbol of everything raw and untamed, decided to go green, decided to go global. And it wasn't evolution. It felt like surrender. The pivot came not with a bang, but with a corporate whisper. Foreign factories, electric motors, sustainability goals, boardroom jargon laced with words like mobility future and brand alignment. But out in Sturgis, out on the back roads of Montana, Alabama, and Arizona, that message didn't just fall flat. It crashed. It clanked like a wrench dropped on concrete, a flat tire at 90 miles per hour. The backlash wasn't about politics. It was about pride, a kind of betrayal that numbers couldn't explain. These riders had held Harley in their bloodline. Fathers gave it to sons. Brothers rebuilt bikes side by side in grease-stained garages. Harley wasn't a machine, it was a myth. It was Sunday morning rides with your best friend and Saturday night drags on empty highways. It was the sound of your youth, the scream of your freedom, the feeling of leaving your past in the dust. And then, out of nowhere, Harley showed up with a silent motor and a press release. When Donald Trump took the mic and called them out, accusing Harley of putting profits over patriotism, it didn't matter what side you were on. What mattered is that he said what the streets were already whispering, that Harley, once the ultimate symbol of American defiance, had sold out, that the roar of freedom had been traded in for a quarterly report. This wasn't a business story anymore. It was a cultural war, an identity crisis, a reckoning. Because to those who'd been loyal to the brand, who'd lived and died by the badge on that tank, Harley's moves didn't just feel tone-deaf. They felt hollow, empty. Like watching your childhood hero endorse something you know they'd never believe in. When Harley planted flags in Thailand, rolled out electric bikes with names like Livewire, and started talking about carbon credits and eco-sustainability, it didn't land like innovation. It landed like amnesia, as if Harley had forgotten who it was, forgotten who they were. This wasn't your granddad rolling into Thanksgiving with a few gray hairs. This was your granddad showing up in tight jeans, sipping kombucha, and asking how to connect his bike to the cloud. It wasn't edgy. It was heartbreaking. Harley-Davidson was never supposed to be clean or quiet. It was supposed to be loud, dirty, defiant. It wasn't a brand, it was a battle cry. It wasn't just chrome and horsepower. It was rebellion dressed in steel. And now it feels like a brand trying to stay relevant in a world that it no longer understands. Harley's empire was built on the back of outlaws and outcasts, on the men and women who believed that a road with no destination was better than a life with no freedom. But now, that empire is being rebuilt on algorithms and ad campaigns, on sustainable materials and wireless charging ports. And listen, no one's saying progress is the enemy. But if you're going to evolve, you better take your tribe with you. Because if your most loyal riders have live to ride, ride to live inked into their skin, and you try to sell them an app-controlled whisper bike with LED mood lighting, that's not progress. That's erasure. So now Harley stands at a dangerous crossroads. Not between gas and electric, not between old and new, but between real and fake, between remembering who they are or becoming just another logo chasing relevance. The road ahead is still wide open, but it won't be the battery packs or the carbon offsets that define the ride. It'll be whether Harley can rediscover its soul or fade into history as just another legend that forgot why it mattered. So now Harley's going electric, yep. The same brand that once prided itself on shaking windows and rattling skulls is swapping out thunder for a soft, polite hum. Imagine trading a wild grizzly bear for a digital toothbrush and calling it progress. And to make up for the silence, they're engineering fake engine sounds. That's right, Harley's answer to losing its voice is Bluetooth growls. Push the throttle and your speakers pretend to be angry. Artificial rebellion straight from the factory. Because nothing says ride or die like a sound effect. The goal? Capture the hearts of a generation raised on smartphones while not completely alienating the diehards who still think streaming means riding through a river. Harley's trying to juggle two worlds, the TikTok crowd that can't afford to fix a flat, and the old guard that doesn't want a dashboard update to fix what ain't broke. But here's the rub. Gen Z doesn't want a $30,000 lifestyle toy when they're barely making rent. And the older loyalists, they're not interested in logging into their handlebars or taking software updates between bar stops. Harley isn't just skating on thin cultural ice, they're doing it with bald tires in a heat wave. And just when you thought the ride couldn't get weirder, enter artificial intelligence. Harley's new plan involves teaming up with tech firms to inject smart features and AI-based safety tools into their bikes. Picture this. You're out on a wide-open highway, wind in your face, and suddenly your bike asks, "Would you like to activate Serenity mode, Greg?" No, Greg wouldn't. Greg just wants the damn road, the roar, and the ride. Meanwhile, dealerships are getting a glow-up. No more grease-stained floors and echoes of old rock music. Now it's leather-scented experience centers with curated lighting, merch drops, cafe lattes, and possibly a mindfulness corner. Because apparently, Harley-Davidson wants to be the Lululemon of motorcycles, just with chrome instead of yoga mats. But the real kicker? After decades of ignoring their roots, Harley's now holding town halls and feedback forums saying, "We're listening." Oh, now you're listening? After outsourcing plants, hemorrhaging loyal customers, and watching your stock chart look like a black diamond ski slope? Sure. Here's a suggestion. Build the damn bikes back in Milwaukee. But hey, let's toss up a "we value your input" box and act shocked when someone drops in a wrench with a note that says, "Fix it." And let's not forget the new buzzword, American jobs. Harley's suddenly talking about bringing back skilled labor, waving the stars and stripes like it's a rebrand. Sounds amazing. Until you ask the hard questions, when, where, how, and all you get is vague optimism and a photo op at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. It's like your buddy who says he's totally going to the gym right after this triple bacon cheeseburger. The truth is, Harley isn't facing a tech challenge. It's facing a soul crisis. You can't sell rebellion through a subscription plan. You can't bottle heritage in a lifestyle app. And you definitely can't win back the street by pretending your electric whisper is the new roar. Because at the end of the day, no matter how shiny the showroom or how smart the AI, if a Harley doesn't feel like freedom, no one's buying it. Not the old guard, not the new crowd, not anyone. Harley-Davidson once stood as the beating heart of American rebellion. More than just a motorcycle brand, it was a cultural institution, a symbol of grit, freedom, and raw mechanical soul. It wasn't built in boardrooms or conjured by algorithms. It was forged on open highways, in small-town garages, in the hands of veterans, factory workers, and lifelong riders who didn't need luxury. Just the thunder of a V-twin engine beneath them and the wind cutting across their shoulders. These weren't customers. They were believers. They passed down Harleys like family heirlooms, wore the logo like a badge of honor, and rode with a kind of pride that can't be marketed. But somewhere along the road, the engine started to sputter. Not from old age, but from decisions made far from the grit of the asphalt. Instead of doubling down on what made it legendary, Harley chose to chase relevance in a world it doesn't quite understand. It turned toward electric, toward global strategy, toward smart dashboards and digital interfaces. And to some, that may sound like progress. But for the men and women who built Harley's empire from the ground up, it felt like betrayal. Because when the roar of your bike gets replaced by synthetic engine sounds and AI-powered ride modes, it's no longer rebellion, it's a simulation of it. A brand that once oozed authenticity is now programming attitude through a speaker system. The people who wore leather not as a trend, but as a uniform of identity are now being sold Bluetooth updates and green energy slogans. And it's not just confusing, it's disheartening. Even worse, Harley's not just alienating its core in America. It's trying to win over a younger, more global audience that frankly doesn't seem interested. A generation burdened by rising rent, economic instability, and 1,000 cheaper alternatives isn't lining up to drop tens of thousands on a smart motorcycle. And those who might be curious? They don't want to walk into a Harley dealership that feels like a luxury boutique, selling lattes and lifestyle accessories instead of the grit and grease that made Harley famous. It's as if the company traded its soul for hashtags, its heritage for market share, and its thunder for silence, both literally and metaphorically. And then came the political blowback. Donald Trump, whether you love him or loathe him, didn't just make a headline, he ignited something deep. When he accused Harley of selling out American workers and chasing profit over patriotism, it wasn't just a political jab, it was a cultural grenade. People were already frustrated watching jobs shipped overseas, watching legacy American companies turn into global corporations that forgot where they came from. Trump didn't invent the outrage, he simply gave it a voice. And suddenly, Harley wasn't just a brand making tough decisions, it was the villain in a story of national identity loss. Now Harley is stuck, straddling a contradiction it can't seem to resolve. It wants to lead the electric future while clinging to a past it no longer honors. It wants to appeal to eco-conscious millennials without losing the loyalty of the aging rebels who made it matter in the first place. But you can't ride in two directions at once. Every time Harley announces a new international factory or rolls out another electric concept or redesigns a dealership to feel like an Apple store, it chips away at the emotional bond that once made the brand untouchable. And the more it tries to fix things with press releases and vague promises, the more obvious it becomes. Harley isn't steering, it's drifting. This isn't just about motorcycles, it's about identity. It's about what happens when a symbol of working-class pride and American grit tries to rebrand itself into something trendier, softer, more palatable to the global market. But rebellion doesn't come with a charging port. You can't mass-manufacture authenticity. And Harley-Davidson is learning that the hard way. If they don't reconnect with the fire that fueled them for over 100 years, the fire that roared across highways and echoed through generations, they won't need to declare bankruptcy. The brand will simply fade away, not with a bang, but with a confused whisper. Because the death of a legend doesn't always come from competition. Sometimes it comes from forgetting what made you legendary in the first place.